So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. It's always so hard not to be to see everybody in person, but hopefully when all this dies down, we'll have a chance to go back to the olden days and I'll come visit you guys. So my name is Urman. As mentioned, I'm the CEO of a company called Rpa. And basically, we're around to help Oracle e-business suites and Oracle Forms customers modernize their applications. So over the years, this is obviously a very different things, whether it's at the beginning.
You're drifting away from your microphone, unfortunately, Mia. So
okay, hold on, let me try. Is that better?
that is very good, and it was good.
Okay,
But there in the middle, you started sort of drifting away to the point where we couldn't hear you anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, hold on, let me put that there closer to me. So basically, over the years, people wanted to put e-business suite into portal, e-business suite as a mobile applications. We've done chatbots, and now we really see that the major challenge of e-business suite is really to open it up as services or as automation capabilities. And then essentially it doesn't matter what you integrate with, as you suggested, right? That there's been tons of challenges with integration of e-business suites, but the minute you allow e-business suite or actually enable it to be part of an automation framework, then you'll be able to automate it from a new user interface, from a portal, from a mobile device, from a chatbot, from an external application, or whatever else it is. So I'm the CEO of a company called Rpa, and that's kind of our focus. And we're very fortunate to have a patented solution, and we've won several awards for that innovation solution, as well as we have customers all over the world, including many in EMEA, that are utilizing our solution for modernization. But today we're really going to focus on what is robotic process automation, how it could help us become more efficient and productive in our everyday back office processes, and really the reality behind the hype, right? Because everybody starts talking and says, oh yeah, you have to do automation, and then people start doing it and they say, wait a minute, right? How are we supposed to do it? Here are all these challenges. How do we overcome these challenges? So we're going to talk also a little bit about what are the challenges to automate Oracle processes, what are the solutions, and some of the best practices in starting an RPA strategy to begin with. So that's essentially our agenda for today. But we're going to start with what is robotic process automation. It's not, of course, robots that are coming to take over the world and do our jobs, but it's basically a piece of software that can be programmed to do basic, mundane tasks across applications and mimic human interaction. Okay, so as opposed to an API that really needs to be created and it works only on the back end, okay? RPA works on the front end, the client side, doing essentially a use case or a business process as an end user would do. So it's really trying to mimic a human interaction, and it's used really to reduce the burden of these kind of simple, repetitive tasks that are done by employees, but that they have a very set type of use case, business logic, or rules that can be set out by an RPA developer. Why has this all of a sudden taken so much prevalence? Is a lot because of the fact that when COVID hit, people literally within a week became remote workforces, right? So you had all of these companies with call centers, with warehousing infrastructure, with data entry processes, and all of a sudden, all of those workers of the day-to-day tasks could actually be automated in such a way where you wouldn't need these workers to connect from home to do the basic everyday tasks. However, you wanted them to be able to focus on tasks that required more human interaction, logic, thinking, processing, and not as much the basic everyday data entry, right? So we said that we really want to be able to rely on technology to be able to cover a lot of this remote processing power. We all of a sudden got huge amounts of questions, right? From customers, from employees, from vendors, where, you know, we needed a whole new almost help desk just to help workers working from home with connectivity issues, with login issues, etc. So they needed more channels to support this remote workflow. And essentially, the prospect of hiring more and more and more, you know, DBAs to help with passwords that were forgotten, or help desk people to answer basic questions, right? All of these things could essentially be handled in a very basic automated fashion, right? So this was kind of this push towards RPA. So the more we look nowadays, this RPA is coming to not only handle a lot of that workload, but it's really to be able to, like we said, shift human beings, their focus from everyday mundane tasks to higher level functioning tasks, to prevent human error. There's tons of human error that is entered into the system in terms of inventory counting, in terms of copying data from one place to another. There are systems in place where people have to copy and paste data from one application to the next, and to kind of get better employee satisfaction when employees aren't constantly doing the same mundane rote task. So in terms of statistics, we see that a lot of organizations, I don't know if they've actually implemented RPA yet, but they definitely intend to. So they've been purchasing solutions at an incredible rate. The growth is something like 30 to 35% each year of this market. And they expect it to increase even more by 32% to $13.74 billion. So basically, this is a crazy statistic, basically saying that everybody will end up having some sort of automation or RPA solution. And the marketplace looks like it as well. Just even today, there's about 30 RPA solutions that I could think of off the top of my head. But the 5 main ones are UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism. Microsoft now has an automation solution for their RPA as well. NICE has one that's more geared toward call center, Pegasystems. But each one kind of has a little bit of a niche with regard to what their focus is. So it's important, we'll talk a little bit more about it in best practices to really understand what you're intending to automate before you select your solution. So what is a bot? Firstly, none of these are bots. I know a lot of times when we hear robotic process automation, right, this is what we're thinking of, right? I really want that robot from the Jetsons, right? They promised us that it would already be here, the robot that knows how to clean your house and that you could order food and it would pop up. So I'm still waiting for that robot to come to me. But in the meantime, this is not what they were meaning by talking about robotic process automation. They're basically talking about a piece of code, a software application that has the rules, the parameters, the functionality, and the data inputs and outputs that is going to be used to create the business process. Okay, so as opposed to what we had in the past with integration and workflows, right? In workflows, we had, or in BPM, right, business process modeling world, we had the process flow, and then it was made up of services. So today they call essentially the bot is the running of an automation of a process flow that's been developed prior. So there are actually 3 types of RPA, of the automations available. One is called attended automation. Here you have the actual bot itself or the automation itself is not running from start to finish as its own unit, okay? It works in conjunction with a human actor to either get data, to make a decision point, to do an approval, but there is some elements of the bot needing human interaction in order to complete the automation. There's unattended automation, which basically means the automation is being fully running from start to finish, unattended, and it could even be done in batch, it could be scheduled. The robot could essentially run from start to finish without any human interaction whatsoever. And there is cognitive automation, which basically means that is kind of the future of automation, which is that we don't have to set out necessarily the full process flow in advance, but the bot itself has an element of natural language processing or machine learning that it's able to determine based on the data part of the functionality. So it's kind of like more of a learning process. And that's something that is going to become more and more prevalent in the healthcare field, for example. They're using it quite prevalently, or even in more complex processes such as supply chain for inventory ordering and things where it could be based on historical data, right? Where the bot can essentially analyze historical data and make decision points based on history. If there are any questions, I'm the type of person who loves questions in the middle, so please feel free to shoot questions in the chat, ask them away, and I'll hopefully see them and get to them as we go, because I hate that after 45 minutes or an hour session, people are like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't understand something you said on slide number 10. So feel free to jump in at any point if you want some clarifications. So like we said, attended automation is when the bot works in conjunction with a human, and it's usually used for when a process can't be automated from start to finish. So it allows the employee would need some sort of either dashboard or input form. That input form would trigger an automated process. And then it could be that a pop-up would occur to allow the employee to add further data or to do some sort of approval in order to complete the process. So good examples of this type of thing is, for instance, if you wanted to do invoice purchase order reconciliation, which is a big one in EBS. A lot of people do that, right? You have a purchase order that you send to a vendor, you get an invoice from a vendor, you want to compare them, make sure you got what you, and the shipping invoice even. Basically, what these bots essentially would be able to do is, if you get an email that contains the invoice, the bot should be able to scan the invoice, bring up a window of the data that basically compares what the purchase order said versus the invoice. If it matches a one-to-one match, it will automatically approve the reconciliation. And if it doesn't match, it could pop it up to the call center worker, who could essentially do the approval or work on resolving that reconciliation. So it really is a nice way of doing more complex, like automating parts of processes that are very complex and still getting user feedback. So the features of these unattended bots, like we said, the scope is basically to collaborate and to communicate in real time with an end user. Makes it way more, these automations need to be very user friendly because they're being done by functional end users. So a lot of times they need a mobile interface or a web interface that sits usually on the end user's desktop. And that could be triggered by, specific system events. So it could be a receipt of an email or something that gets done in the database. But it really allows for administrative intervention, decision-making and points, workflow, and things of that nature. Unattended RPA is basically end-to-end automation. There's little or no human interaction. And so a good example of this would be price lists. We're going to talk a little bit later about customer stories, and we have a great customer story where they took their pricing list process to a fully RPA automated process. You get a price list via email. The RPA engine sees that there's an email attachment. That attachment is then loaded into eBusiness Suite as a new price list for a certain product. And this can be done without, very little, if no human interaction. Okay, the script replicates the actions of the end user, where they don't need to open the email, they don't need to download the attachments or input the price list at all. And it's self-triggered. And in this way, these attended bots can work basically 24/7, right? They could be accessed remotely, they could be scheduled, and it's an incredible way of achieving, legacy modernization without the need to create APIs, without the need to, migrate your backends or things of that nature. And you could essentially put them in batch processing as well to enable things to go even quicker. Finally, cognitive automation is what we are talking about, and this is kind of the most exciting type of automation. And basically what it's going to allow you to do is to have bots work on massive amounts of data, okay? I think you have a machine learning and AI session this afternoon, if I'm correct, with Rick Nemec. So if this is at all of interest, I highly suggest you kind of look into that, because basically what it's doing is it's merging the world of machine learning and artificial intelligence with automation. So it's basically saying the computer will read massive amounts of data, learn how to suggest courses of action from that machine learning, and then take a position to automate based on what it's learned. So for instance, a lot of people are using this type of flow to do quick diagnostics for a hospital, in hospitals' emergency rooms, right? If people put in their symptoms, and then the bot is able to analyze past data and suggest courses of action. So it's actually very funny. Here we had my HMO, I don't know how you say it in Europe, what they call it. The medical insurance has this app that basically it's for a skin doctor. You can take a picture of a mole, you describe where it is on your body, you answer a few questions, and then it comes back to you if you need a doctor's appointment or not, right? So it's kind of incredible, right? Where if you think about it in the past, for every mole, people would have, a doctor's appointment. It costs tons of money, and it was very inefficient for the doctors, for the patients, etc. And here's a way that they could use, the photos and the automation of this type of process to, move quicker through the medical workflow. So candidates for RPA are basically any type of tedious or time-consuming task. It should be able to be something that could be validated using data. Okay, so there should be a way to see if it was success or failed based on data received, either parameters received or something of that nature. They could be redundant tasks, right? Basic tasks that many people do in parallel, kind of like call center-based tasks, and hopefully ones with very limited variability. So it's not things that have lots of changes in the middle, but things that are pretty much standard across the board. Things that we wouldn't suggest you do automation is, of course, one-off tasks or things that are very complex, things that are unpredictable, that change based on who's doing it, what user, what role, things of that nature. Things that involve various people to do various approvals throughout the approval process. and things of that nature. So what I think we should do is first look at a little bit of a demo, right? I just want to make sure I'm keeping within our time frame here. Okay, I have 45 minutes, just to remind me.
45 minutes, we can spend 50 minutes also, but I mean, then we already spent 5 minutes on the break, so.
Yeah, so we're gonna start with the demo, and then we'll go back and discuss the challenges with Oracle automation. Or at least that way I know I'll get my demo in. So the first step of the automation process is going to be to automate the EBS business flow. Okay. So essentially what we do to start is we're going to create the automation on top of eBusiness Suite. To do that, we go into, this is Rpa Service Manager. This Rpa is an RPA solution that's geared specifically towards eBusiness Suite and Oracle Forms. So we are very specialized in that area. And now we're going to create the automation for Oracle Sales Order. We're going to show how we create a sales order automation by recording the business process inside EBS. So now we're just running EBS to get it started. And from now on, any of the actions that we perform in eBusiness Suite will be recorded as part of the automation that will play back based on whatever trigger we want for our automation. Okay. So right now we're going to enter the username, password, and these are going to be captured as input parameters to our RPA flow, to our box. When we connect, we go through the menu, and of course, all the menu items, the F keys, the buttons, all of these are captured as part of the automation functionality. Okay, so we're going to enter more data. We're entering the customer name, the order type, the date ordered. And again, anywhere where we enter data, those are going to be required input parameters for our RPA flow. And we're now going to save the sales order header. And now we're going to go in and create line items. So as you can see, this is a pretty complex process to do, create an order and line items. We've been through 4 forms on Oracle eBusiness Suite, right? This is not one API that's available, especially if you have customizations, personalizations, anything specific in EBS for your organization. So now when we save it, we created the order information as well as the line items. Of course, you can make multiple line items if you would want as well. But now we want output information. We want to be able to validate that the order number was created, as well as the subtotal, tax, charges, and total. Once we've created that business process, okay, we see that we have the inputs and outputs, but we're able to do other functionality such as to capture LOVs, to capture parameters would bring us all the data that's on the screen. Save and pause would allow us, if there was a pop-up, to create multiple branches for our automation. But right now, what we've done is we've created an automation that would take as input the username, password, customer, order type, ordered number, quantity, and request date. And as you can see, it took the labels as they appear on the Oracle EBS form. It has the name as it appears in the EBS application, as well as the default values that were used during the recording. We also have the output parameters of the date ordered, the order number, the subtotal, tax, and charges, like we mentioned. We could tick multi-record, which would essentially return many rows if many orders would be resulting, if it was a table of a master detail. And we could establish now additional validation, because what we want to say is it's not enough that it just does the automation. We also want to make sure that the response contains FRM 4400, which means record applied and saved. So if it does not return that value on the status bar, we know that there's been some sort of error that has occurred, even if the automation has successfully completed, right? Because the automation can successfully complete with an error message just as easily. So once we click save, we are then provided with a REST and a SOAP endpoint as well. But this is now a fully independent automation. If we click test, it is going to run that automated process from here, which is the testing web page. And we see that we've created a new order number. We have in our status bar message 4400. So success is true. If we are going to go in and dynamically change the input parameters, so the quantity, instead of being a number, it will be a letter, which of course in EBS, this will result in an error message. When we run the test, we see that success is now false because it did not pass our validation of the status bar. And we have a pop-up message that the legal characters are between 1 and 9, which means they must be numeric. This basically is how we create the first stage of the functionality on EBS to create the service. However, what happens when we create services for Oracle E-Business Suite? A lot of times, because of the complexity of Oracle E-Business Suite, the bot tends to fail if Oracle applications patches are installed, or if changes are made in the form, or if they get a pop-up window, right? So the actual RPA solutions that are, the company leader, the industry leaders, do not necessarily know how to handle this complications, right? What they do, essentially, how they do the automation is they run the Java applet on a virtual machine. They play back the automation step by step, and then they get back the responses. So essentially, the rendering and execution time is much slower because they run the Java applet, as well as they're very sensitive to the windows, pop-up windows, tab canvases, and if changes are made in the form. Why we are excited about the specialized RPA for Oracle is that the automation is working with components. It's working on the WebLogic server, not with a form session, with EBS session, not with the actual Java applet. So the bots are very robust and immune to UI changes, to patches, and it's much more scalable, and it's much easier to deploy and move between environments. So essentially, using the capture that you saw right now, we are able to make EBS automation much simpler and more robust than what's currently available. And now, once we've created the service, as we saw, we're going to now look at how we create the RPA flow, right? So right now we have one service that is able to create an order with ordered items as a sales order. But what if we would get our sales orders from an Excel file, right? We have a customer who sends us every month an Excel of 100 orders, and we want to be able to do that in batch, right? We don't want them to have to enter in 100 orders every month. We want to be able to get a CSV or an Excel file that has the details of the orders and pass it through an automation. So here we would go in the service manager to the automation area for RPA, and we would create a new flow chart diagram to create our sales order from a file. Here in the sales flow diagram, we're able to select various types of elements to add. We can add a service that was from EBS that we created. We can add an external service, which is essentially SOA Suite or any other API, database API that was created. We could add conditions, if statements, loops. We could send an email, we could read from a file, or we could even do a JavaScript element to put any type of transformation code that the end user might want, for example, to compare data or to manipulate or transform any type of data. So these are all the elements that are possible to do as part of our RPA flow diagram. But the first thing we're going to want to do is to create the sales order. We see here the parameters that were captured as part of our initial service, right? Username, password, customer, and order type. And we click keep alive because we're going to want that data to be passed down to the insert of the rows as well. If I click on the handle errors element, we see here that it automatically creates a loop on what to do upon failure. So should the sales order neglect to save successfully, what should happen? Should it send an email? Should it exit the process? Should it continue on, etc.? So the handle errors literally in an automated fashion allows you to step through the application and handle any errors that may arise. So here, once we create the RPA sales order, we're going to make a loop. And here's our invoice lines that we would like, right? Each item ID, the quantity, and the date order. And we're going to loop through a CSV file, but as you can see, you can loop tables through iterations, through static parameters, etc. For each line in the file, we're going to want to create the row. So we have here a row number that we're going to capture from the Excel file. So we simply click plus and the loop values, and it has the items from the CSV file, the quantity column, and finally the date column. Once we do that, we're essentially going to want to have some sort of indication when it was successful. So not only are we going to be able to send an email to ourselves when it was successfully saved, but we're able to additionally add either data parameters or error messages into the subject and into the message. So we would like it to say order created with the order number, and in the message, we're going to write the status bar messages. And again, we're going to take from the service the status bar message, and we're going to save this process. We can automatically, from the flowchart diagrammer, test it as well. And in the test results panel, you'll see what was executed, that a new order number was created, the success is true, and the pop-up messages, and that we got a status bar message with the email. So this is essentially the difference between just having a simple service running on your application versus having the full flow from start to finish. So essentially, as we saw, the first thing to do when you create your RPA application is to begin by selecting a use case. What are the most valuable, cost-effective flows, right? Where are you using call center to answer questions? What could be done in your EBS application to save people tons of time, money, mundane tasks, or areas that have a lot of error handling, right? Inventory management is a huge one where people have a lot of errors in the inventory capture. Next, select an RPA solution. If you're going to do things on, HTML-based applications or Microsoft-based applications, you could look at Microsoft UiPath. If you're going to want to modernize or automate your e-business suite application, I would love it if you took a look at our solution to alleviate all of the challenges we discussed earlier. Next, you create the flow chart and the process and map out the actors involved. You can even do this on paper initially. And then in the solution, you will create the bot and scale up to grow as you go. But the key is to start with a single process and finish it, start to finish, have your low-hanging fruit, and grow and scale. So like we said, the main benefits of this type of automation program should be to relieve your workers from repetitive processes. So it's very key that you really do a methodology analysis before you get started on your RPA program to understand where are the places of inefficiency, of data errors, of redundancy, to allow your employees to focus on the complex tasks, right? We want to really reduce the human errors and the costs of those errors. And we want to try as best as possible to work on existing IT infrastructure, right? To use this to modernize your legacy applications and not necessarily to need to redevelop everything as we go. The complex is, there are a few risks and challenges when embarking on RPA. And number one is really to try to have employees embrace the process, right? Have them understand that you're there for them, that you're there to help them make their jobs more engaging, more exciting, reduce their burden of boring, mundane tasks, and elevate their day-to-day workload, avoid duplicate work, etc., so that they won't have pushback, right? So you won't have employees, basically the unions come to you and say, hey, away our workers' jobs with robots, right? A big way to do this is really to also track the return on the investment, right? How many hours are you saving? How many extra rows of data are you able to enter? How much time are you saving? That type of thing. Also, to begin simple, right? Don't go to the most complex process you have in your entire organization and try to use that as your first use case for RPA, right? Start with something that is a small, low-hanging fruit that you'll be able to do successfully, so you'll be able to understand the tool, to get all the actors involved, they'll be engaged, to get buy-in, and then get more experience as you go. And another big challenge, depending on the type of use case you do, is the ability to do what we call character recognition. A lot of use cases involve the reading of PDF files or the parsing of data files. And currently that's not, 100% mapped out of the box. There's still a lot of challenges with regard to being able to do parsing and understanding of those OCR applications. Okay, I'm still okay. So I want to just jump quickly to the best practices. So it's really important, like we said, for RPA to not just, automate something for the sake of automating it, but to really design it out, go to the functional users, and engage the teams. We have several use cases in all types of areas. So in banking, you can automate the absences, the approvals for accounts receivables, for purchase orders. In manufacturing, you could automate item creation, receipts audits, automate sales order creation. Jubilee Life did something very interesting for DBAs. They created Shayna, who's their automated DBA. So basically, you could send Shayna an email, and you could say, unlock my user, reset the session, reset my password, and do all types of basic DBA functionality. And that happens automatically. That runs a script in the database to perform those actions. So they've gotten rid of 65% of the DBA queries to do very silly things like, I forgot my password, to reset my password. So that's an actually incredible idea of a bot that almost every organization with Oracle would probably love to have. A lot of people are doing inventory management. Salem Insurance is actually doing generating healthcare certificates, which is really interesting, right? So for COVID, everybody needs certificates that they are vaccinated. And again, there's no human that should be involved in that process, right? Somebody should be able to send an email saying, I request a passport, vaccination certificate, and be able to get that certificate back in the mail. So, a lot of these things that are right now taking call centers hundreds of hours could be automated, in a matter of weeks. So there's tons of these use cases, like we said. Worthington Industries saved 200 hours of development time, and they are able to insert more than 50 new receipts per day by using automation. So they're using a mix of UiPath and Aura Player together. They use UiPath for the character recognition and the orchestration, and Aura Player for the e-business suite automation. Jubilee Life did something similar. They went from a process to create a customer policy from 24 hours to 4 minutes. They used to literally have to ship forms between branches with a courier. And now with the automated changes, it happens in 4 minutes. So these are all testimonials available on our website if it's of interest to hear people's best practices and how they did it. Same thing with Haaretz. This is the International Herald Tribune. They had basically 70% of their call volume was people calling in to say that they have changed their address or they want to freeze their subscription for a certain period of time. So they created automated capabilities of doing those things from their website, from the customer portal. And they literally reduced their call center volume by 70% just by taking away those 2 queries. So just as a side note, there are tons of investments going on in the area of RPA, things like automatic decision-making, like we mentioned, extracting content from handwriting, from PDF files, natural language processing and machine learning that's going to be integrated along with artificial intelligence. And they're going to kind of expand it more to virtual personal assistants, etc. But basically, we highly suggest people really start looking into the capabilities of automation, because we have seen incredible ROI in most of the organizations. But of course, you have to also factor in a few things before you jump right in, which is, of course, how will the data be secured? How will information and passwords be transferred between the systems? What types of back-end systems are you going to be automating to make sure that the tool you select is the correct one? Employee backlash, if you have unions who feel like you're taking away employee jobs, how will you handle that? And essentially, how is this going to be rolled out into the organization, right? If it's attended RPA, are you going to need some sort of dashboard or mobile application? So as there are a lot of things to consider, of course, as an Oracle ACE director, I'm always happy to answer people's questions. You could always contact us for free consultations to really get the ball rolling. We're really excited by customers who start their legacy to modernization journey. So you could contact me at, I'll put my actual email here. They're always afraid of overloading me. But I'm always happy to answer questions from the community, and feel free to reach out. And thank you once again, Groundbreaker community, for having us and for inviting us to talk. And hope you guys enjoy it.
Thanks a lot, Mia. So the floor is open to any questions that may be. I haven't been seen any in the chat box nor in the Q&A window. So if anyone wants to ask a question here, that please feel free to raise your hand and let me know, and we'll get it done. This is exciting. I mean, I've been looking at the sort of the embryo of this tool in a way with the, what was it called, Data Load Professional, which basically did the same thing, right? Connecting to the backend directly and bypassing forms. And for the very, very simplest task, you could actually use that, but this is of course much more powerful. So that's exciting to see.
Exactly. So it's very interesting. Data Loader was kind of the first step, which was just loading of data. But this people are really able to do full range of functionality. Like we have customers doing booking and picking orders, right? So it's not even just data, it's after the data has been loaded. Approving time cards, approving, doing the work list. We have people that have a work list mobile application and they can approve their work list. So it's kind of like a mix. If you took data loader, Oracle workflow,
Yeah.
and the email notifications, and if they all had a baby with the work list, right? So it's something around that.